Hi, for those who are new to our growing experiment, I'm Sophia. This is my husband Jordan. We're here in our dome, which is situated in our backyard here in Sudbury, and we are in Zone 4B. So we're creating this video just to give you a little update on the podcast. So up to now, we've released 15 episodes, which has been a lot of fun to create. We've talked to some really interesting people, had some really great conversations, and we're looking forward to creating more podcasts.
So this new podcast we're putting out is going to be our first on-site podcast, and we really liked it. We think it was a really good interview. I think that being on-site is something we'd like to do more in the future. We found that interacting with the producers in their element, I think, provides for a more comfortable, better conversation, and I think we also get to learn a lot more, being able to see what's going on. So in the future, we'd like to do a better job of doing that. And to do a better job of doing that, we're going to need to probably get a microphone or something like that to ensure a good sound quality. And that's kind of where we're at and what we're looking to do in the future. So enjoy the video.
Welcome back to our growing experiment. We're here at La Ferme Idéale in Noëllville with Marc Seguin. Marc, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your farm?
I could. I'm Marc Seguin. I guess I'd be fourth generation dairy farmer here in Noëllville. Before that, we came from Quebec, Ripon, and they were farmers up there too. So back in 1912, I think my grandfather arrived and they helped to cut down the trees and deforest for land clearing. Okay. So I'm married, 4 kids. One is partner with me on the farm. 2 are helping part-time, and 1 is a full-time heavy-duty mechanic at the mine in Red Lake up north. So she travels 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And it's kind of special because it's a girl.
Yeah.
So about the farm, it's mainly a dairy operation. It's under a quota system, so all our milk is sold. What we have to do is, as long as it's refrigerated in the bulk tank, there's a transport that picks up every other day. Right now we're sending out about 6,000 liters every other day. So then that milk goes to the plant in Sudbury, which is Beatrice Parmalat.
I'm not sure which it is.
I think it's the same company now, but I don't know if they changed the name on.
I've seen both, so I can't remember which.
It's right on the highway.
Off the Kingsway.
Yeah, when you're driving on 17 there. Yeah, it's right there. There's a few big silos. Okay. Anyways, most of our milk will go there, but it's, as you know, it's pooled with other farmers so they can fill the truck.
Okay.
So we don't know if it's all our milk, part of our milk, or that goes there. And the milk is under dispatch system. So all the dairies that take the raw milk will call in and ask or give them orders. I need so many thousand liters for that day, every day of the week, and I don't want none on Sunday. I want some. So the milk is dispatched to whichever plant required the milk, which is the closest to us. Okay. There is also Nickel City cheese in the valley that will use local milk. Okay. So that's kind of a newer venture for them, I guess. Mm-hmm. And it's nice for us that we know that some of our milk might come back right here in the stores. Yeah. So otherwise, the milk might be going to Quebec, like when nobody needs it all, then it'll go to Quebec. Butter, powder, cream. Mm-hmm. Sudbury is the eggnog manufacturer. So in December, there is more milk going to Sudbury for eggnog.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So it's kind of weird, but Only I don't know if there's only Sudbury making eggnog, but
Right.
Sudbury is a big customer for that.
Hmm.
For our milk, I should say.
And you said you have 6,000 liters every 2 days going. So what does that look like for like how many cows does that say being hooked up in that period to get that amount of milk?
It's always the same cow.
Okay, so it's always
So we're milking 115, 118 cows.
okay every day,
Twice a day.
twice a day.
Yeah.
Okay, and so I guess it's probably the situation too where you have to milk them often to keep the milk production up for the cow, right?
You have to relieve them.
Relieve them. Okay, so basically they'll be in pain if they're not milked twice a day.
Ask your wife.
Well, that's partly what I was thinking about a little bit because like when we had our
Yes.
kid, right? It was the same idea.
Yes, it's not all cows are the same.
Okay.
Some will have a big production. They will need milking more often,
Okay.
or they should need more often. Whereas the one that have less milk,
Mhm.
they could do with a little more longer interval of milking.
Okay.
But we're on a fixed 2 times a day, 6 a.m., 5:30 p.m.
Right.
Yeah.
So cows adjust
Mhm.
or leak milk.
Okay.
If the pressure gets too high, the milk leaks.
Right.
So it'd be nice if we could go at 3 times milking,
Mhm.
but then the lifestyle of the farmers is shot.
Yeah.
You're tied to your cows.
Mhm.
You probably already are, right?
Yes, but we can do both chores.
Right.
If you had a third one, you'd either have to sleep twice a day in shorter
Right.
periods, which by experience with the neighbors or other farmers who did the 3-time milking, it's very hard on life
Mhm.
Yeah.
because everybody is, not everybody, but you need one crew to milk this shift, one crew for the next shift, one crew for the next shift. So it becomes managing people more than managing a farm.
Right.
So that is more difficult.
Mhm.
Maybe I would say 500 cows are easier than 10 person.
Wow.
Manage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can get a bunch of cows to go along in one spot, but it's
Yes.
pretty hard to get 10 people to go along.
People are more knowledgeable. They all have their ways of thinking and the ways things should be done.
Mhm.
So
So when it comes to like say when you're milking the cows twice a day, there is that like how long does a cow spend hooked up to the milker, or are they all hooked up at one time? Because I know nothing about it.
the cows come in groups of 6 in the milking parlor.
Okay.
It's called the milking parlor because they're coming on the main floor, but the operator is down in the hole,
Okay.
which is about 3 feet deep, so that you have the udder at your height to
Okay.
work with.
Okay.
So they will be hooked up 6, one after the other one. There's 6 milkers on each side. So while some are milking, you prepare the next group, the next 6.
Okay.
Wash them, washes, disinfect, remove debris,
Mhm.
disinfect, wipe clean,
Mhm.
and we attach the milk.
Okay.
So while you do that on one side, the other ones are being milked. And our system has the automatic takeoff. So when the milk flow reduces below a certain amount,
Mhm.
the vacuum on the unit turns off and it pulls the milker off that cow.
Okay.
If the other one's not done milking, she keeps on milking
Okay.
until the milk flow reduces to a certain amount.
Okay.
So the milkers are on average about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Varies from cow to cow.
Right.
There are some cows that takes 20 minutes because they really, really, really slow milk. And they give a lot of milk.
Mhm.
Right.
So what we do in that case is that we take the 6 slowest milker in the herd, we bring them all together. So it's only one time to wait that 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of having 6 times during milking, waiting 15, 10.
Yeah, so you really got to know kind of each cow and how
That's
much
right.
they produce, so you
Yeah.
can group them together to maximize how efficient you'll be when you're getting it all done.
That's right.
And like you said too, you got as you got the 6 that are already in the milker, you got the next 6 are being prepped, ready to go, and then they'll slide right in.
That's right.
So a nice kind of like production line.
It's kind of a routine. When you're done attaching your milkers on this side, these ones are ready to let go. So then you re-dip, dip again. Another bacteria prevent thing to enter the udder.
Mm-hmm.
So you put this dip on, it makes kind of a coating, and then you let them go. Bring in another new 6. So one person does that.
Okay. And so when did that become like a part of what, say, dairy farming was? Because being that you're a part of, say, a 4th generation dairy farmer, when did it stop being like people go out to the barn, maybe you wipe off the udders and you just milk away, to having something like the machine? Or is it when it became like a big production, that's when that happened? Or
it happened gradually.
Okay.
As they want to improve their lives, instead of milking by hand, they bought a portable milking machine.
Okay.
And then the pipeline came in. So then your machine was portable, but you did not have the tank with it anymore.
Okay.
You only had the claw. So it was a gradual, and I would say every about 20 years there's something different going. So then when as I mentioned before, my dad's brother was on the other side of the road and he was on this side, and they worked together all their young lives, and then they went their separate ways, and then they got back together in '73 and they built this barn. This barn is labor efficient because it has a slatted floor, so the manure all goes under, so they don't need the track to pull the manure out.
Right.
They don't make a pile, they just make it a liquid underneath. So that was labor saving for that time. And then they installed the milking parlor instead of going between each cow, kneeling down, putting the milker on. So it's an improvement in lifestyle gradually.
Yeah. Well, even the way you described it, it kind of reminded me of like a place where you would go, say, do oil changes for a car, right? Like you'd have the pit underneath where the mechanic goes. Instead of jacking the car up in the air, you just go under, you undo and then you drain the oil, and on your way you go. So it has been trending towards making it more
easier on the man.
Right, exactly. Because that's one thing that we commonly hear, especially about traditional farming, is that it's very labor intensive and it's very hard work. And from what I understand, generally, you're not paid really all that well for the work that you're doing too.
That's right. If you have 5 cows, 30 liters a day, that's 150 liters of milk a day. You cannot live on selling 150 liters a day. Right? So you can live with the work they give you. That poop you gotta shovel out. That feed you gotta bring in. That water you gotta haul by hand. 5 cows is okay. But the moment you increase past 25 cows, you need a lot of help to keep going the way you are. Traditional. So this is why the machines comes into play.
So I wonder, it's probably as it got more streamlined, you probably start to see bigger farms, and that's probably where you get the competition in price, right? Where you have a really, really big farm, because of their scale, they can do way more cows at one time, right? And they probably can cut a lot of their costs because of how big they are.
Yes, but on the revenue side, everybody's paid the same.
Okay.
Because of the quota system.
Oh, okay.
We're all paid base price for a liter of milk.
Okay.
But if your butterfat content and your protein content are higher, you get extra. If you're lower, you get less.
Okay.
So it's based on a liter of milk at 3.8, I think, for fat. So if we can produce it at 4.3, 4.2, we get a bonus.
Okay. And so how would you, like, say, try to make that the case? Like, how would you increase your protein content or your fat content?
There's 2 ways. There's feeding. If you feed forages where the cow will chew her cud longer, that will increase the milk fat production.
Okay.
Because her saliva is like baking soda.
Okay.
And it's a buffer for the stomach so that it helps out into making more butterfat.
Okay, so it helps with the digestion, the breaking down.
Yes.
Because they have 4 stomachs too, right?
Yes.
These ruminants.
Yes.
And so even in that, I guess, because they're chewing on their cud, that is almost like a 5th stomach in a way, because they're really, really breaking down what they're chewing down with their saliva. And then it enters, no?
To explain it a bit is that a cow will go out and eat and fill her first stomach.
Okay.
Then she goes lay down and regurgitate that, what she'd already ate. It comes back up and she chews it again. That's what you call a ruminant.
Oh, yeah, I didn't understand
And
that.
then-
at all, yeah.
And then that goes back, but then it's passed along.
Okay.
Like there must be a valve there somewhere.
Right, yeah.
So that's how so the longer the fiber, I guess,
Mhm.
the more they'll have to chew.
Okay.
So the more chewing, the more bicarb soda they make,
Mhm.
the higher the fat content in the milk.
Okay.
The other way would be through breeding.
Okay.
So if you select sires that are prone to produce daughters with slightly higher levels, you should increase that in your herd also on the long term.
Okay.
It's not something you can see overnight.
Right. A few generations down the road,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah. Okay, and so is that something that, like, say, you would say work on or have been working on, say, since you started? Like, are you when you're? I mean, do you participate yet? Like, do you have them breed and you select the sires and all that, or how does
I
that work?
select the sires and artificially inseminate each of them.
Okay.
So this way we know which not to do inbreeding,
Right. Right.
because I know the lineage.
Right.
So we try to get more fat into that all the time.
Mhm.
But sometimes a cow does not necessarily need the fat. She may need better legs. She may need a better udder, better rump.
Right.
There are a whole bunch of criteria we can select for.
Right. So you're looking at the general well-being of the animal as
Yes.
well. Like you're saying, okay, this animal here, like, yeah, she makes great milk, but I'm always having problems with her hooves or something
That's
like
right.
that. Right.
Yep.
Right. And so you say, okay, well, yeah, she's a great milker, but there's that problem there. So maybe we won't let her pass on her genetics for the next go.
Right. In this case, if there is, or even a cow that's perfectly fine, but doesn't produce much milk, let's say 5,000 liters in a year versus 10,
Mhm.
well, this one we won't breed her back to her breed. We will breed her to a beef breed.
Okay.
And eliminate. She can still stay in the herd and produce,
Mhm.
but her offspring will be eliminated from the milk.
Right.
So that's one way we do it.
Okay. And so I always understood that sort of like there would be, like, say, someone who would do dairy farming and someone who would say do beef farming.
Yes.
But so you do kind of both.
Both.
Right. And so, and is it sort of like how you said there, where mostly a beef cow will come from a cow that, say, doesn't produce well on a milk line? Or I guess as well, you would have specific breeds that you're going to try to go after.
Yes, we have actually 2 breeds. We have the dairy breed and we have the beef breed as purebreds.
Okay.
So then we do the crossbreds between the 2 breeds,
Mhm.
the beef and the dairy.
Mhm.
So that end result is usually sold as a calf.
Okay.
So we don't raise the half breeds. We don't have enough room.
Right.
For enough barns for them all.
Right, because that's almost a whole nother undertaking on its own, right?
Yep.
I mean, because I'm just thinking about even if you were just doing the breeding for just your milk cows, that's a whole nother layer on top of what you're already doing.
Yep.
Because, yeah, I mean, you're managing a bunch of different stuff there. It's not just the milk production and all that, but you're also paying attention to biology and breeding, right? Like it's very, very in depth.
In the purebreds, both beef and dairy, we usually keep our offspring. But for the crossbreds, they all go. In the Holstein breed, the dairy breed, all the males are sold at birth or a week old.
Mhm.
They don't make any money for us.
Right.
They're a byproduct.
Yeah.
But they will be used for veal or for homesteader who wants to raise a beef for the year. They'll buy one of those calves.
Mhm.
They'll feed them, bottle feed them for 2 months, and then slowly switch them over to grain and hay.
Okay. And for something, say, like veal, that's I always knew was like a calf. Is it a particular diet? Like, say they're strictly on milk, and then you keep them on that as long as possible, and then you'll go and slaughter them, or
There's 2 types of veal.
Okay.
There's the milk-fed veal, which is the smaller, which is slaughtered younger.
Mhm.
think it'd be around the 5-6 months of age.
Okay.
And there's the grain-fed veal, which will be around 10 to 12 months of age. So that one will be a bigger carcass.
Okay.
But they call it the white veal, which is milk-fed, and then they call the other one the pink veal.
Okay.
Because of the color of the meat.
Oh, so the white veal will actually be a lot lighter in color.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess that makes sense if all they're eating is milk, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other one there, the red veal or the red meat. Or sorry, the pink. The pink. So that one there, they're going to start eating grain at some point.
Oh yeah, they start at 2 months.
Oh, okay, so pretty early on. And then so even so, say with just something that's not going to be end up being veal, is that the case too, or do they stay on milk for a long time?
On our farm, all calves are weaned at 2 months,
Okay.
2.5 months, except the calves that are sucking off their mother.
Okay.
The calves that are weaned at 2.5 months is because we feed them from day one and go on.
Right.
At about a month and a half, see, they're born as a monogastric.
Okay. One stomach?
Yeah.
Okay.
That they can only utilize milk.
Okay.
Then they start gradually eating a little bite here, a little bite there. Then their stomach starts to change. Their microbes in the stomach starts to change. So it's a slow process. You can't wean a calf today, like at, say, even earlier than 8 weeks is pretty difficult because they're not used to eating yet.
Right.
So if you back up in nature, they should be on mom nursing for about 8 months. Give or take. A lactation is on dairy beef, on beef cows is about 8 months, but a lot of farmers will wean them at 6, 7, wait a month, and then ship them to the auction.
Okay.
There's quite a few different ways of doing the same thing.
Right.
Some people will wean them at that age, but they'll keep them for a year and then sell them direct to slaughter. It all depends on whatever they like, I guess.
Right.
Whatever
Right.
pays their bill.
Right. Yeah.
Is usually the first thing.
Yeah. Well, that's at the end of the day, that's what you got to really focus on. Is
Yes.
I mean, you are a business, right?
Yes.
And so that's exactly what it is. You got to make your money. And so, being that you produce dairy here, is it like, say the bottle that you're going to be feeding to a calf, if you're feeding them, that's not going to be, say, the same as what you're buying from the store. That's going to be something that I imagine you get directly from the mother cow, and you, say, store in a vat somewhere, and you kind of get some and you feed them, or?
When we're milking the cows,
Mhm.
we take the milk directly from before it goes to the bulk tank.
Right. Okay.
So it's fresh from the cow, it's warm from the cow, this is what you get.
Right.
It's called raw milk.
Mhm.
Right.
On a natural raw milk diet.
Mhm.
Then what you buy at the store is pasteurized.
Right.
But that's done after it leaves here,
Mhm.
once at the dairy.
Okay, so that's after the truck comes along, gathers all the milk. He'll gather probably a bunch of other
Yep.
farms in the area,
Yep.
and then he'll go to the dairy
Dump.
and then dump it, and then it'll get pasteurized.
Yep.
And then it'll go to, say, someone like Nickel City Cheese, where they're going to go and
nope.
make it. No?
No, Nickel City would receive it directly from the truck.
Okay, so they're going to get the raw milk,
Yes.
and then they'll pasteurize themselves. Because all dairy in Canada is pasteurized, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's is that like boiling it or heating it, or is there?
I'm not sure. I think it's 180 degrees
Okay.
for X amount of seconds, minutes.
Right. So they're just trying
And
to
then-
kill the bacteria in there?
and then cooled really quickly.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure of the length of time, but yes, it is to kill the bacteria that may be in the milk.
Well, and that's another thing too, because I've started to hear more commonly, I think in California and maybe some other places, some people have started taking to drinking raw milk.
Yeah.
And I mean, like any kind of movement, there's all these people who say, oh, if you get it as fresh as possible, like people will say the same thing about veggies. They'll say, eat only raw vegetables. That's the best way to do it, you know?
Right.
And some people even go further and say, oh, don't even wash them. I mean, that's here to there. But I kind of wonder with that, like, you know, with the raw milk, are we getting a lot more from that milk than, say, you are from pasteurized milk? Like, of course, we're losing some of the bacteria content, but are we also losing something else that's there. I guess it's hard to say.
Vitamins or something.
Vitamin D is burnt off.
Okay, so that's why vitamin D is always added.
Yes.
Okay. Right, that's that vitamin D3 that they add all the time.
Maybe.
I think so.
I don't buy the milk store.
So you must
No
get it.
reason
You must
to.
get it right
I
here,
have
right?
raw milk.
Right.
I
Okay.
have raw milk.
And you're
Always-
alive, so it must not kill you.
The bacteria we find in milk most of the time doesn't come from the cow.
Right.
Diseases will come from the cow.
Ah, okay.
Bacteria is along the way to the customer.
Right.
That makes sense. It's how you store it and all that.
How
right?
you extract it,
Mhm.
how your pipeline that goes to the tank,
Right.
and then the trucker's hose that comes in,
Right.
and then the cheese vat.
Right.
They're all exposed to the environment.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yes, some are sealed closed, shut, but the milk will pick up bacteria along the way.
Yeah.
And they say they can never have better quality milk than direct from the cow.
Mhm.
But we're not allowed to eat it.
Right.
So it's a little contradiction there.
Yeah, because the way that it's described there, it kind of makes me think the same thing as when you make beer or wine, right? You always sterilize the bottle really,
Yes.
really good because that'll harm the cultures that are in there, right? So it's actually it's not the cultures you've created. That's fine. Same with the cow. It's not the cultures the cow has created. It's whatever little thing gets in there because your tank is not clean or
That's
your
right.
pipe is not clean or
That's
something
right.
like that. So that's really the issue. It's more when you're at a large scale production, say, and you have to make sure everything's cleaned and all that. You're just better off to pasteurize it. That way you eliminate the risk of that. And then you clean whatever comes after that. You put it in the cart and then off it goes to the store.
That's right.
And I wonder, is there a difference in, say, shelf life? Would raw milk last not as long because it's, say, living still? It's still active? I mean, you probably don't keep it long. You probably drink it, and then when you need more, you get more.
I've seen milk in my fridge for a week.
Okay. I think most milk that you get at the store stays good at least a month or so. Pretty close. Probably 3 weeks. I'm thinking of when I look at the tag
2
on
to
there.
3 weeks.
Well,
Yeah.
That would make me think that there's no bacteria in the milk.
Exactly, because if there was, it would rot or would ferment. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Nature.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. That's
Nature.
exactly it.
If it's not used, it's spoiled and returned to the soil.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, too, that I've started to learn as we've been getting more involved in talking to farmers and stuff like that. A lot of things that we would think of as being waste or bad or whatever else, all that is a restarting of a life cycle. You're just
Right.
taking something that now is ended, and that just means it has to be basically put into the building blocks of the next thing that it's going to be, which is a plant or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what breeds do you have then for your dairy cows and your beef cows?
For the dairy cows, we have Holsteins.
Okay.
In the Holsteins, as we spoke earlier with the breeding, I was able to eliminate the horns on about 80% of our cow herd, and I'm at about 95% on the female, on the younger cattle.
Okay.
And we have a few Jersey cross Holsteins, and a few, we have them left. Milk King Shorthorn out of a Jersey Holstein. The reason for that is that we find the Holstein a little too big for our barn, for our stalls, because with artificial insemination, we've always been buying in our semen, and a lot of the selection out there has been done on a bigger cow.
Right.
But our stalls don't grow.
Right.
They were made in 1973.
Yep.
Okay? So we realized that with crossbreeding with the Jersey and the Holstein, it made a much smaller cow, and it worked much better in our barn.
Right.
So that's the reason. Fat-wise, the Jersey produces a higher percentage of fat.
Mhm.
To me, I think it's a more efficient cow. She eats a little less, but she produces more fat. At the end of the day, the Holstein and the Jersey cow probably produce about the same kilograms of fat.
Right.
But she ate more. She drank less. Whatever.
Yeah. A little less input, right?
Yeah. So in the beef breed, it's the Belgian Blueberry, which is a fairly rare breed in North America,
Mhm.
which is was developed mainly for more meat.
Right.
And it was developed in Belgium, as the name says,
Mhm.
and I was able to create hornless Belgian Blues,
Mm.
which now the Belgians are coming here to purchase genetics.
Oh,
So that's my
contribution.
my pride and joy
Mhm.
on that side of the business.
Mhm.
Well, that's like you said, pride and joy, because when we were first talking about buying a cow off of you, one of those Belgian Blues, I went and I Googled a Belgian Blue because I had seen them before, and they're an amazing looking animal. I mean, they're I didn't know you could fit that much muscle on an animal's frame. And I was looking at not a contest, but like a show where they were showing their genetics and stuff.
Yes.
And there was one, I want to say it was 4,000 pounds or something like that. Does that sound about right? I remember it was a staggering number.
Possible.
Maybe 3,000. Is that
Yes.
more likely?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe it was 3,000 pounds.
Yes.
But either way, when you looked at it, like the arse end on it there, it was like the leg was here and the arse went like out like that.
Yep.
And you got to think like that's a ton of meat.
You bet.
And so from what I understand, that comes from, they have a myostatin deficiency. So basically it's a gene defect that stops them from growing muscle.
Yes.
Well, actually, rather it's the gene would normally tell them to stop making muscle.
Yes.
And because they don't have that gene, they continue to make muscle.
That's right.
And so what would you say is, like, say, the difference in the meat with like a regular animal? Because my intuition would suggest to me, because there's more muscle, that maybe there'd be less fat.
Yes.
And
You're right.
seeing the Belgian Blue too, they also look like there's not a lot of fat on them. So does that make for not as tender meat? Because usually people tend to think of fat and the meat, the tenderness.
Yes. You're right. The muscle fiber of the Belgian Blue is thinner than the regular cattle, therefore making it a little more tender.
Okay, so it's more like thin layers layered on top of each other instead of thicker layers. Maybe.
Suppose I explain it as you take a 1-inch rope versus a baler coin. Which one will you chew on? Which one will you cut with your teeth the first?
Right.
Not the big rope.
Mhm.
Yeah, the
the
smaller thread.
So the muscle fibers, that's how I explain it. Thinner and a bigger muscle fiber.
Mm-hmm. And so,
But there is a drawback to this amazing breed.
Okay.
It has light tasting flavor in the younger animals.
Okay.
I prefer anything over 3-year-old.
Okay.
Then I have my strong beef taste, because I was raised on Holstein. Holstein beef was usually an old cow that you're done milking, which would have been 7, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Right.
Right.
She's got all the flavor of beef.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting too, because one thing I noticed when we went to Portugal recently was they typically eat younger animals.
Mhm.
That's just their practice. And I noticed that there was definitely a very different taste in the meat. And also they don't do dry aging. And I don't know if that's like a standard we have here, but I know a lot of meat will generally dry age. And that's an introduction of bacteria, again, to make the meat work.
2 weeks, we always did.
Right.
Hanging 2 weeks, but I don't know if that's what you call dry aged or what,
Right.
or if that's another.
Right.
They hang them after killing in 2 weeks, and
Mhm.
but you can ask for 5 days, 2 days.
Right. Yeah.
They'll do it.
Yeah.
But
It's not the practice.
no,
Well, and that even
it
makes
depends. If it was a veal, they would probably want to do it within 7 days.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Being good butchers,
Mhm.
they have the knack of seeing the animal live. Okay, that's a young one. They'll skin it. They'll do whatever they have to do with it.
Mhm.
Okay, this one needs X amount of time. This one's too lean. This one's too fat.
Yeah.
This fat one can stay a few extra days because it's got a
Mm.
layer to, so the meat don't dry.
right. Right.
Whereas the Belgian Blue don't have the fat cover. They should be done 2 weeks. Is
Right.
good enough.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like because we try to buy all our meat local now, and we've been trying to do that as much as possible because we really believe that we want to see more people around, like you, doing what you guys do. And what people ask me, like, well, does it have that kind of taste to it? Like it's almost like there's a taste we've become accustomed to from these big farms that you get at the store. And I imagine maybe it's because like they're aiming at like one taste, but it's like really the animal has a bunch of different tastes, and it's going to be different tastes for different animals. It's not like one's good and one's bad. It's like, well, what do you like?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, if you're used to that older cow taste, there's going to be more of that distinct
Yes.
beef kind of taste. It's not going to be as bland, right?
That's right.
And it's a little more character, right?
Yep.
And so that's how I try to describe it too. Like people will say, does it have like a strong taste? And I just say, well, it tastes like beef.
Right.
Yeah, because to me, because like where I grew up too, people hunt lots, right?
Okay.
And so when you eat like say moose or you eat deer, there's a little more of it's not the same taste, but it's similar sort of.
Yep.
I find, at least. Or do you find that, or no?
For the age wise,
Yeah, I guess the age maybe
Yeah.
giving it more of that
Yeah,
taste, or there's
for
a
sure.
distinct taste.
for sure, veal is very tender,
Mhm.
light on beef taste.
Right.
Take an older cow, she'll be a little tougher, but there's taste to it. There's strong flavor.
Yeah,
Right.
it's probably the way you cook it, right? That's going to make the difference too.
Not much.
No.
Well, yes, if you put different spices and
Mhm.
stuff,
Mhm.
but if it was just boiled,
Mhm.
the old cow will still retain that strong flavor
Yeah.
versus that young one.
Mhm.
And all the beef in the supermarket, not all, but most of it is graded.
Okay. Yeah.
AAA, double A, single A. You have an idea what that means?
No idea.
AAA means the most fat you can have on beef.
Okay, so it's strictly about fat content.
Well, fat and ribeye size.
Okay.
So they must meet these. There's a kind of a ruler you put on the meat there. Yep.
Right.
So double A is less fat, and single A is still less fat. And below that amount of fat, it would be called ungraded beef.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that it's not good.
Right.
It just means that it doesn't meet a double A, triple A.
Right. Well, and that's funny because as a consumer, it's the same. It's almost the same silly thing that you'll do. You're like, oh, well, this thing must be better because it's more expensive. Or this thing has 3 A's and this thing has 1 A, and 3 A's must be better than 1 A. So there it goes into the shopping cart. And really, that's like you said, it's the fat content. So say if you're a person who's gonna cut all that fat off your steak and not eat it anyways, why buy AAA when you could buy double A or single A, right?
And when I say amount of fat, it would be also including the intramuscular fat.
So the
one
marbling.
The marbling, that's right.
Right.
The one you can't cut up.
Right, exactly.
So people are, I'd almost say brainwashed.
Mhm.
That the fat needs to be into the meat all over the place
Mhm.
to make it juicy.
Well, that's the Wagyu steak, the most expensive steak, right? And if you look at a cut of that, it's almost like
Snow.
yeah, it's like all the way in through there, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very different than any kind of steak cut I've ever seen. And people will think maybe because it's more tender because there's more fat in there, or I mean, the fat itself does have its own flavor, and it takes on the
Yes.
flavor of what you cook it in.
For sure. I had Wagyu about 3 weeks ago.
Oh,
My
okay.
brother-in-law brought it up from Kitchener.
Mhm.
He's really wanted to try it, and he wanted to try it with me so that I could see the difference or feel
Right.
the difference. I don't see how they can sell it that high.
Yep.
It was good steak,
Mhm.
but nothing out of extraordinary.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, I wasn't amazed. I enjoyed it.
Yep.
But I wasn't super sold on it.
Yep.
I said, well, I can produce some for you, but they will be only crossbreds.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
And if I'm going to produce some purebreds, I need to buy embryos, put them in my cow, and then a year later I get purebred Wagyu.
Mhm.
But then you're still going to have to wait 2 years before you can eat it.
Yep.
So I said, if you want me to do that, you got to pay the embryo.
Yeah.
And you got to find customers with a deposit on these cows.
Yep.
Well, I said, I hope that your experience tonight dictates what you can do or want to do in the near future.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, it was almost cutting with a fork.
Yeah.
That I agree.
Mm-hmm.
But the value at $80 a pound?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'd like to sell it for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But poor customer.
Yeah.
No, I shouldn't say poor customer. It's
Yeah.
the customer who has the buying power that will buy it.
Yep.
Yeah,
So you're catering to the high end of the customers.
Mhm.
Don't know if I want that.
Well, it's almost sort of like, and like you said too, it's the idea that people have bought onto. So it's almost more like Wagyu just had a better salesman. Like, you know,
Yeah.
the person selling Wagyu says, "Hey man, this is the best you're ever going to get. Like, it's got a bunch of fat," and we all know fat's great, right? You kind of look around and say, "Oh yes, fat's good." Say this cow's got tons of fat, so this is the best cow, and you got to pay me $80 a pound for it. And someone says, a regular person would say, "Wow, I'm not paying $80 a pound for steak. Like, I like steak, I'm not doing that." But you got someone who's got a little bit of money. It's a little bit of a status symbol, right? Because you can say, "Oh yeah, we were having some Wagyu beef, me and the boys, or whatever," right?
Yep. Had a
And
beer.
people, exactly.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
know then you got money, you got a little bit of status that way.
True.
And and that's the funny thing too, we find when we talk to lots of farmers, it doesn't really matter. Like you can get a perfectly good cut of meat from an animal anywhere.
Mhm.
It's got really nothing to do with the fat or anything like that, I find. Like, well, maybe I don't know enough about it yet, but
Fat does play a little bit,
Mhm.
but it's not to what it seems that they make believe of. You know, well, I'm just a producer.
Yeah.
I got nothing to say. It's when I see the ads on TV for the beef there or whatever. There's always something that gets. Me and my son, we watch that very carefully, and there's always some kind of misinformation there.
yes.
But who are we to go and talk about that?
Yeah.
This is not right. This is not right. You're the only one who says so.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true, exactly. And if you're the only one saying it, even if you are right, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
Because everyone else they already know, they're already right. Like, they already know, and you're just an outlier, right?
An example, grass-fed beef.
Yeah.
Now, what else do you want the cow to eat? She can't eat sawdust. She can't eat meat. She can eat grains.
Mhm.
Well, if you back up far enough, they would only eat grain in the fall, if there is any grain in the wild.
Right.
Right? 'Cause
Exactly,
It has
yeah.
to mature.
Yep.
And before it matures, it's a grass.
Yep.
So, what's the big deal about grass-fed beef? That's all they should eat.
Yeah, exactly.
Corn is a grass.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
don't see it as corn as a grass because we see the kernels
Yep.
as a grain.
Yep.
But when we harvest corn for silage,
Mhm.
the whole plant is used.
Right.
Whereas high moisture ration, that's just the kernels.
Mhm.
And the veals are raised. Some veals, grain-fed veals, will be raised on corn. And supplements for their vitamins and what's not available, the fiber.
Right.
So that's not natural for them to eat only that,
hmm
but it's a special meat.
Right.
To create a special meat, you need to feed them a special way. But the corn still comes from the grass.
Right.
So there's a perception on consumers' part. Oh, if they don't eat grass, they won't be good. You know?
Right.
Oh, cow can't eat anything else but grass. Sure. Vegetable byproducts. Bakery byproducts.
Mhm.
It's all blended in some feeds. Not all farmers want to use them. Well, that's fine.
Yeah, because like, and that's a good point that you were making too. Is during most of the season they're going to be eating grass, and there's no corn available, and up until fairly recently, where we
Yeah.
start storing it over, and we'll use it as feed to get us through the winter or whatever. But yeah, up until what goes into making that kernel is the same thing that goes into making the whole stock. And if the stock is fine to eat, why not the kernel? If they come from the same thing, essentially.
But
Now
there's
it might
more
be
starch.
right. Well, that might be the issue: is the balance of
Yeah.
say starch
Yeah.
versus your fiber and all that. Because corn obviously is going to be higher in sugar and stuff like that. And there might be I think the idea a little bit is that the grass finished, say, versus grain finished, they say, whoever they say that there's going to be a little bit of a difference in the taste. Is there any truth to that, you think?
I would believe so.
Yeah. I mean, it does make sense.
To someone who knows the difference,
Right.
but to the main consumer in town, he might notice that his beef didn't taste like the last beef, but why?
Yeah,
He won't
exactly.
know.
Yeah.
So, marketing has a lot to do with the product.
Yep.
The better mouth you have, the better salesman you become.
Yeah. Well, because it's even like for me, and this maybe is funny too, because as I started to get a little bit older, I had this idea about, like, say, drinking whiskey. I figured, like, once you got older and you were kind of a gentleman type person, you drank like straight whiskey, right? And so I started drinking it, and I'm like, well, it's not really good at first. Then you acquire the tongue for it. And then anyways, then you start getting into what's a good whiskey. Well, you go to the store and you say, well, that one's $200, so that must be really good. And this one here is $40, so it must be okay. But then once you actually really get into it and you really develop a tongue for it, you can actually say, oh, no, this bottle here is $40, but it's just as good as any of that, right? And so very few people have that, because you'll have someone who's sort of a whiskey drinker who doesn't drink it very often, and you'll put two whiskeys in front of them and they say, yeah, they're whiskey, but they can't tell you this one's better or that one's better.
Right.
And just like the average consumer, when they're getting this beef or that beef, because they're not actually tasting it, they're not taking the time, and they're not eating like steak back to back to back to back and thinking, oh, I'll take a cut of this. Okay, this is pretty good. I'll take a cut of this.
Right.
What's the difference? And so because they never have that direct comparison,
That's right.
it's just totally in their head, and it's totally the marketing of it, right?
Yeah.
It's a market capture, right? I mean, that's kind of like anything. And like you said too, you could know the truth, but it doesn't do you any good if everyone else believes something else anyways.
Right.
And what are you you can't force them to believe what, and the harder you try to tell them, like, there's no difference, they'll say, well, you obviously don't know anything. And so you're better off just to bite your tongue.
So very often.
Yeah.
Very often. So,
What is it? You can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Do you butcher your own meat?
no. Only if it's a broken leg or a quick accident.
Mm-hmm.
We're allowed, but I don't have the equipment to process it.
Right.
I can hang it, butcher, skin, dress everything, but once to cut the steaks and all that, I don't have the equipment for it.
Right.
I did what they call the Belgian cut, which is everything is deboned, muscle by muscle, dissected basically.
Okay.
Took me 12 hours
For one animal.
for one animal. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was learning on
Yeah.
where the muscle goes. It's pretty intricate.
Yeah.
These muscles are not all straight.
Yeah.
No, some of them are kind of a ball, so you got to go around and push the other one.
Mm-hmm.
But no, we get it done at Creative Meats.
Mhm.
We get it all priced, put it in the freezer, and we take out of that. It was not sold that day what we want.
And so, like you mentioned, the machinery for it. So a lot of the butchering isn't done by hand. Like, for me, I have a picture in my head of like some guy basically working in an abattoir or something like that, and like the cow will come in on a hook, and maybe they take a few cuts off, or they take a big chunk off, or say they quarter it, and then he goes and he starts going, okay, I got this section here, so now I can get this cut, I can get this cut, and away he goes. Is that kind of how it works?
They have a bandsaw.
Oh, okay, very
So,
similar to that.
Yeah, so there's the rib, prime rib, and then I think there's the rib, braising ribs.
Okay.
So they would cut just about there, which is quick in the saw.
Mhm.
Then they turn it around and make the steaks according to the
Size.
customer's wants.
Mhm.
So yeah, they will break them up in bigger pieces first, and then they'll chop them. So you need a bandsaw, you need a hoist to bring it to
Mhm.
your table, because again, 100 years ago, the abattoir, they would all haul it on their backs. Nowadays, you don't lift more than 45 pounds.
Yeah.
You know, you're gonna save your back for longer and all this stuff. So
Yep.
they have mechanization there.
Okay. And then I'm also thinking too, when you're processing the animal, after they're say they're harvested, do they go to like a freezer and then they're frozen, or they hang at like say
It's a cooler.
a cooler,
Yes.
and so they won't be frozen; they'll be cool, and
Yeah.
then they'll go through the bandsaw cool, not frozen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They are frozen only after they're cut and wrapped.
Okay.
If the customer requests it.
Right.
Otherwise, you pick up your beef the same day. You won't be frozen. You'll freeze it at home.
Okay.
So, in a 100-pound to 200-pound lot, no big deal. But when you buy in 800 pounds, you stack that in your freezer. Well, there's still heat in that meat compared to your freezer.
Right.
That will take almost 2 weeks for the center to freeze,
Oh, really?
because the heat has to travel from one package to another.
Right.
And it's really, really slow.
Yeah.
So I prefer having it freeze over there because it's in boxes,
Mm-hmm.
and its freezer must be set lower than freezers at home.
Okay.
Because I think they called it fast freeze.
Okay, and that makes sense. I never would have thought of that. But say if you buy a huge quantity of meat and you just take it from not frozen, you throw it in the freeze, and you say it takes 2-3 days to freeze, you're going to have a lot of inconsistency if maybe you don't even have a little bit of spoiling.
2-3 days is not bad, but if
Yeah.
it gets to 2 weeks, you may start to have some smell to it.
Yeah, exactly. It'll spoil your meat.
Because it's already 4 weeks old now.
Mhm.
It hang 2 weeks, and it's still 2 weeks not frozen in your freezer.
Mhm.
We've had experience with large amount of beef, and now I can tell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that's how you actually learn stuff and know stuff. It's
Exactly.
actually the experience of it. And so that means, so you guys here are producing your own milk, you're eating your own milk, you're producing your own beef, you're eating your own beef. Do you also have any kind of a garden or do any of that, or do you have no time for that?
I try.
Yeah.
Gardening. I mainly grow tomatoes and sweet corn. I love growing pumpkins just for contest fun.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how quick that grows.
Yeah.
The wife likes to have peas, carrots, sweet corn. Most of my married life, I sown enough for ourselves plus for sale.
Mhm.
And we kind of quit that when the kids all left home.
Mhm.
And then I missed it for a few years. So last year I started again, planted a big batch of corn for one household. So we sold maybe 15 dozen of corn at the end of the year.
Okay.
Gave some to the daughter, gave some here.
Mm-hmm.
I ate. When that's on, I can eat that all every day. Corn on the cob. I love it.
Yeah. I can remember that was a thing. Like when I was growing up, we had a garden, and that was one thing that my dad would grow. And he the neighbor always said he grew bigger corn for some reason. I don't know what it was, or where he planted it, or how he fertilized it. But we always had corn. We always liked peaches and cream. I think they call it. Yeah, that's what we like to eat. Yeah, that's the reason I asked that too is because like a lot of people who are starting to get into the sort of farming space, a lot of them are getting into smaller scale farming, and they're trying to do more of a self-sufficiency
Yes.
kind of thing and be
Yes.
more kind of self-reliant.
Yes.
And I guess that's probably where your roots would sort of be, because I imagine when you're going back 4 generations, your family living on the farm, they would have been totally self-sufficient, and that would have got passed down from generation to generation.
Not totally self-sufficient.
No.
You could never be.
No, but you
You
must
need-
have a lot of the skills that are required to really take care of yourself. Like you probably know a lot more than the average guy.
I can manage my garden pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the thing is, you always have to plant more than what you actually need.
Right.
Pests, wildlife,
Mm.
storms. Sometimes they'll destroy a crop.
Mhm.
So, and someone interested in preserving it,
Mhm.
freezing it or canning it or whatever.
Yep.
So if you've got want of all this, you can do it.
Mhm.
Some crops are easier, some crops are harder. Your soil will tell you what you can grow.
Right, and that's what you do too. And that actually makes me think that idea of growing way more than you need, because that's one thing you wouldn't really think of, right? Because you think, oh, well, you plant it all and you see it growing, like, wow, I have lots. And then when you finally go to preserve it, or you've already eaten it, whatever, you're at the end, you're like, oh, you've got nothing. And like you said, the pests and the bugs and all that, it's almost like when you start out, just assume you're going to lose a certain portion, right? Because it's going to be eaten by bugs, or you're going to lose it. Exactly. But it makes me think back to like, even like in the Bible, they would tell you to plant like, there'd be like 4 corners of your field that you would leave for like charity. And maybe it's for people walking by who need food. But even if it's not for that, it's just like you said, it's having that extra because you need more than you think.
Yes.
You're always going to need more than you think.
Yes.
Right. All right. Well, I think we're getting pretty close to being at an hour here. So we'd like to thank you for your time and talking to us. I feel like I learned a lot about meat that I didn't know. And for anyone who would like to say buy some of your beef or get access to some of your products, where would they be able to get it, or what's the best way to go about it?
Actually, it's only available through the farm here.
Okay.
We have no sales stores.
Mhm.
So phone call, Facebook,
Okay.
email.
Perfect.
So it would be, what are you called on Facebook?
Marks again.
That's okay. Okay, and then your email
Ferme Idéale at yahoo.ca.
and your phone number.
705-898-3446.
There you go. So anybody wanting to reach Mark, that's how you reach him.
Perfect.
The phone will pick up messages only after 9 rings. Be patient, as I am with everything here.
You gotta be, right?
Yeah.
9 months for a pregnancy and a full year for a crop.
Yeah.
Yep.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks so much.
You're
Yeah, thank you.